Remember the first experiment in psychology that was conducted in the 1800s? This is also when the first ever psychology textbook called Instructions was published in Münster, Germany. A professor named Ferdinand Bernhard Oberwasser wrote this book, which talked about how human processes like empathy and memory could be understood and tested through experiments. In other words, through research. Now, after the closure of his university in 1849, Oberwasser's work ended, but Wilhelm Wundt, who was a professor at the University of Leipzig, then dove headfirst into experimentation and observations in 1879, taking psychology much, much further, and through that research, ensuring that as a field, it continued to thrive. In this lesson, we're going to explore research in psychology. You will learn what it is, why we do it, and by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the role of research in developing psychological theories, and you should be also able to discuss the reasons that research actually takes place. So what do you know right now about the relationship between theory and research? Theories organize information to help us make sense of the world, and research tells us that we've made sense of the world the right way. Now, theory does not invent a new phenomena, but it does help explain why something happens and predict what else can possibly happen. So in its simplest form, a theory is a psychologist's explanation for particular events or phenomena that they find interesting. And then psychologists conduct research to check whether that explanation is accurate. In everyday life too, we're always conducting research because we have many theories or explanations for why things happen around us. So, for example, you may be someone who sleeps very late at night, and every afternoon in your math class, you find yourself zoning out, maybe even taking quick naps. Hopefully your teacher has not noticed this. When you're asked why you're always so sleepy around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you start to think about your routine every night, and then you realize and you say, well, I think it's because I sleep late and I wake up early, and so by the afternoon I'm exhausted because I'm just not getting enough rest. Simply put, that's your theory. It's your explanation for this sort of sleepy phenomena that occurs every afternoon, and you're basing it on the evidence or the real life fact that you are a night owl who refuses to go to bed before 3 a.m.
Quick pause. If you're finding value in this explanation, there's so much more to discover at Alt Academy, where we break down every A-level concept with the same clarity. Now back to the video lesson.
So what is research in psychology? Now, in psychology, the focus of all theory is on explaining, describing, predicting, and figuring out how to change or control human behavior and emotion. So theory then is merely an organized collection of ideas that explain this phenomena. However, keep in mind that psychological research is also influenced by the approach of the researcher and the context that they're working in. So, for example, if a researcher ascribing to the cognitive approach is studying a behavior, then they're more likely to develop a theory that explains that behavior through cognitive processes. Their research will only take into account existing knowledge within the cognitive approach and then build on that, either by revealing evidence that develops a new theory, adds to an existing theory, or even disproves an existing theory. Similarly, it's also totally possible that the same behavior or phenomena is studied from the perspective of more than one of the core approaches. So, for example, multiple psychologists could be studying aggression in human beings, but each of them is looking at it through a different approach. So a psychologist within the biological approach would use genetics and hormones to explain aggression. Meanwhile, a social psychologist can explain aggression through social group norms of what is acceptable behavior and what is unacceptable. And since each approach has its own assumptions, strengths, and weaknesses, they also each have different explanations, and therefore research supports different kinds of evidence. But why is it so important in the first place to have that evidence for all explanations? Let's look at that. So why do we need research? Now, remember that theory is simply an organized collection of ideas that explain, describe, predict phenomena, or tell you how to change phenomena. Because psychology is a social science that focuses on using factual evidence to support theories, think about research as the investigation that supports, adds to, or contradicts that theory. So, what do you do when the answers you get contradict your theory or your explanation? You have it right. You do even more research to find a better answer. In a nutshell, for psychology to remain objective, scientific, and accurate, it must stick to the facts and evidence needed to prove or disprove explanations, descriptions, and predictions about or interventions to control human behavior. So, regardless of which approach is taken and what the explanation is, psychologists must gather facts and data using research to support their theories. And since context, that combination of personal and environmental factors that we live in, is always changing, it's very important that research is a continued practice in psychology. This is because research is meant to develop new theories or explore new behaviors, but remember, it also tests existing theory so that it can add more layers of complexity to it, and of course, to check if that theory still holds true. For instance, till the late 1960s, we believed that children were like miniature adults. So their brains were supposed to be exactly the same as the adult brain. And this obviously influenced the way that kids were taught in school, the way they were treated at home. But thanks to developments in technology and the continued use of research methods that tested this theory, now we know that children's brains actually continue to grow and develop. And in fact, the human brain is finally set to mature at age 25. And teaching and parenting methods have evolved based on this information, which means that the way children are educated and raised has changed. By the way, you, a high school student, have a brain that's still growing to its full potential. So make sure that you give your gray matter all the nourishment it needs. Well, now that we know how research is important for gathering evidence and facts to support a theory, what is part of these fact-finding missions? What information is collected exactly? Fair to ask those questions, and we'll explore these questions in our next lesson. So keep watching.
Hey there! If you found this A-level psychology lesson helpful, why don't you head on over to altacademy.org, where you can sign up for the full A-level psychology course. In addition to psychology, we offered 7 other A-level subjects. Thousands of students have already taken the leap. What are you waiting for? I want to see you there.